the time. Number one was, we will corrupt their youth. This was in 1919. We'll get them interested in sex, and we will make them superficial and weak, and we will destroy their ruggedness. Everybody knows that our schools, our grammar schools, high schools, and colleges are where the next generation of leaders of a nation are found. And today we have watched the systematic destruction of our young people. Some years ago, a man named Gene Wolfenbarger wrote a book called When Hollywood Says Yes, Can America Say No? And I think the title kind of says it all. And we have so been caught up with the Hollywood genre that it is basically ruining our lives. Some years ago, when they celebrated an anniversary of Hollywood, they interviewed Darryl Zanuck, who was one of the founders of Hollywood in the early days of movies. And they asked him, they said, what did you do in movies in those days? He said, in those days, we created America. And they said, what do you mean by that? We created America? He said, we set the standards of how men ought to act. We set standards how women ought to act. And if you're old enough, you remember some of those movies in the old days, before 1960, that there were values that were taught, and there were morals that were shining through the script and the characters in which we saw them. We went from kind of Ozzie and Harriet to Ozzy Osbourne in the last 40 years. And we've watched the destruction of a culture and destruction of our young people. Their ruggedness has been ruined. And today the sexuality that is bombarding the young minds at a time when they are filled with all the hormones working, it is a huge tide that is wrecking our young people's lives. I met a young girl, we were doing a rally in Chicago, and I met a young girl who was 16. She had a little baby on her lap, and she had a toddler. She's 16 years old. And I was sharing Christ with her and telling her about the values of giving her life to Jesus. And she said, preacher, she said, I'm going to tell you something. I'm 16 years old, and there is anything you can think of I haven't done. And that's because culture, the breaking down of the family, has wrecked a whole generation. And I don't know what it's going to take to get us back except turning back to the Lord and back to principles and values that were so inherent in all cultures and all civilizations from the beginning of time. 6 of the 10 commandments are inbred and put into the fabric of every culture ever discovered in the world. Amazing, isn't it? That somehow God has written his laws upon our heart. There's another book that came out some years ago called Entertaining Ourselves to Death, The Story of America. And we have become so caught up with entertainment as if that is what life is about. And when you start down a road chasing an entertainment and you exceed the limits, it soon becomes an infatuation and almost an addiction. And we're watching the destruction of our young people. We have this thing called the college phenomenon, to where everyone has to go to college right out of high school. How many of you are old enough to remember that usually you graduated high school and you went to work and you worked your way through college? Anyone remember those days way, way back in the old days before 1960? And when you worked and then you went to school, you learned and you had a grid by which you could take information and begin to put it into practice, and you actually learned something. Today, with the pressure on grades, kids have to study hard, cram for tests, pass the test, and then quickly forget what they learned so they could begin the next class. And I've talked to many people who graduated college, and I asked those who are college graduates, just in your own self, how much of what you are doing today did you learn in college? Okay? Yeah, probably not much. My son is a computer geek on his way to becoming a computer nerd. And he had totally technical courses. He said, Dad, everything I learned in college is totally outdated in 5 years. So nothing he learned in college, the tens of thousands of dollars of tuition and effort and all the tests and classes have taught him nothing. He could have learned on the job and been way ahead of the game. And I remember the old days people went through apprentices and apprenticeships. And they learned on the job, and someone took care to mentor them so that they not only learned their skills, but they learned ethics and morals. And so the destruction of the youth is taking place. Number one pillar is fallen. Number two, we will control all forms of media. Publicity and propaganda will keep the people and keep their mind off government and keep them occupied with entertainment, sexy books. This is before radio and TV and video games. Sexy books, dramas, and other trivialities of life. The average today, young people spend 9.6 hours per day with media influence. That means they got iPods, ears pods, nose pods, they got pods everywhere. And the average conversation between a parent and their child is down to about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And probably 2 minutes of that 2 minutes and 30 seconds is, hey, don't forget to put the garbage on and get those socks out from under your bed. And we have lost communication within a family because of TV, music, radio, iPods, all those things. Last week I